Hey, so there is a report that's circulating around, and it's provoking quite a strong emotional response for understandable reasons. It involves a lawsuit that is taking place against the Memphis Shelby County Airport Authority and the TSA that is in charge of that jurisdiction. And basically, what this lawsuit encompasses is an incident that took place in June last year. Very often, that's a case that these things take some time to really garner to the national attention. As it turns out now, international attention. But I've looked at both angles, and you know, the thing is with a case like this, it is important to try to think objectively and not just with emotions. I agree with that, but it's very hard not to be moved by this case. So basically, what happened is a young woman, Hannah Cohen. Some reports say she was 18 at the time, she was 19. It could actually, she's probably referring to the fact that she's 19 now. But she was 18 at the time. She had been in St Jude Children's Hospital in Memphis for a brain tumor, and her and her mother were on the way back to Chattanooga. So this was an internal state flight. Um, Apparently, this operation had meant she was blind in one eye, deaf in one ear, and partially paralyzed. Now, apparently, the mother and daughter had done this journey on numerous occasions and they'd never had problems. And the usual procedure would be that the mother would go through the security checkpoint first in order to reassure her daughter. Apparently, the young woman was felt disorientated and scared in unfamiliar circumstances. You can imagine this as a major life-saving operation she's just been through, a very presumably energy-consuming and traumatic experience. Now, she should have been at home celebrating this, the operation. Instead, she ended up in a jail, bloodied and bruised, and presumably deeply traumatized by the experience. What happened is, as she went through the security checkpoint, the alarm went off. Now, supposedly, this was because of the sequin in her dress. Could have been little beads or something. This is not an unusual occurrence. You get people, sometimes they forget to remove their keys. Sometimes there's metal in someone's belt. Perhaps it's cash in someone's pocket. It happens. It's human error. Um, by all accounts, what happened was the TSA agents completely overreacted, and instead of using common sense and trying to understand that this young woman had a serious disability, and her mother apparently tried to explain this, the police held her back. There was a scuffle. The young woman was scared. She then fell to the ground, or whether they threw her to the ground or not, I don't know. But the point is, she fell to the ground and hit her head. There's very disturbing photographs showing her looking very frightened, blood pouring from her head. I appreciate that you can't judge everything from one photo, but I've looked at a lot of different angles on this. I've looked at a lot of different reports, and they all indicate the same thing. And basically, the outcome here is that the family is suing the TSA and the airport authority for $100,000. Now, this is the excuse that the airport is making. Just looking from the news report here. And by the way, this has made international news. It's been reported in the British Guardian newspaper. Um, TSA spokesman Mark Howell and Jerry Brandon, Chief of Public Safety of the Memphis International Airport Police Department, said they could not comment on pending litigation. Anybody can file anything, and we don't comment on active litigation, Memphis Shelby County Airport Authority President and CEO Scott Brockman told the Commercial Appeal newspaper. Clearly, there are additional facts in this matter, and we won't comment until we address the litigation. To me, this is a card's answer. Okay, I get that there may be legal barriers where they can't comment about the details, but at the very least, they can reflect and have some sort of statement of regret that this happened. Okay, they don't maybe can't go into the details of it, but to me, it's just a cowardly response. And what I find particularly appalling about this case is to add insult to injury, to rub salt into the wound. This young woman was charged with assault and spent the night in jail after she was assaulted. It should be the other way around. And I know I shouldn't bring emotions into it. I know it's important to think objectively in this case. But firstly, there is a very long track record of the TSA being accused of abusing their power, right? Secondly, just because someone is wearing a uniform doesn't automatically make them right. So people saying, oh, but they have to follow procedure. Well, I'm sorry, but this sort of thing happens all over the world. I mean, you have situations where there are security alerts in airports all over the world. Terrorism is a reality, and I understand we live in a dangerous world. That is not an excuse to violate someone's liberty. It is not an excuse for the blatant abuse of power. What they should have done is, when the security system went off, calmly brought her to the side, tried to understand the situation, and when her mother was explaining it, they should have listened and used common sense. These people must be fucking idiots. I'm sorry, perhaps I'm biased, perhaps I am thinking emotionally, but are they completely stupid? If the mother was explaining this, they should have listened and tried to be reasonable. This happens in airports around the world, and in most cases, security officials see common sense. So I see no excuse for this case. I see absolutely no rational way that justifies the way they responded. If anything, the family is suing them for damages. I think they would have a case for pressing assault charges as well. And if there was any fair justice coming out of this case, the TSA agents responsible would be arrested for assault. I'm afraid, okay, I'm an outsider. This is my outside perception. But it seems to me there are far too many cases in the United States with TSA agents, with police officers, who basically are like gods on earth. They, it's basically a case of they could do whatever they want. And because of this dynamic that there is this threat from terrorism, then it's almost used as a catalyst, an excuse for this sort of unprofessional behaviour. And the irony about this is it just lets the terrorists win. Because then they think, oh, we've got America scared. You know, the ISIS and so on would love a case like this. It's exactly the sort of thing they want. I appreciate that you can't take risks. I appreciate that the TSA is tasked with protecting national security. But that is not an excuse to brutalise civilians, especially someone who has already been through a traumatic experience, a vulnerable person. So, frankly, it's sickening. And okay, I'm bringing emotions into it, but to be honest, it's hard not to. I've looked at both sides. I thought, okay, well, was she being violent? Was the mother being violent? No, I haven't seen that reported in any of the accounts of this. Okay, I really think, they're saying, oh, we can't comment about litigation. I think they're really just trying to protect themselves. I think if they were really so innocent, they would be saying something. They may not comment on the details, but I think if this was really a case that they were justified in acting the way they did, they would have been saying something. Now, one of the things that's come out of this is, or one of the excuses that they're using is, oh, passengers with special needs need to contact the airport 2 hours in advance. That's an excuse. Common sense shows this young woman was vulnerable. Doesn't take rocket science. And I know terrorists, you can't like draw a picture of a terrorist, but it seems to me that common sense went out the window here, and it was a case of just brute-minded thuggery taking place. And it sounds to me like people who were blatantly just abusing their position because they could. According to one report, the family told a newspaper that a female TSA agent was laughing as the mother was trying to explain this. Now, we don't know if that's true or not. It is only what they have alleged. If it's true, it's a disgrace. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this. The family is suing them for $100,000, and by American standards, that doesn't seem so much, actually. There's been lawsuits that have been a lot more than that. Um, But for me, the issue here is not the amount of money; it's the principle of it. Because if you use the atmosphere of terrorism, which is a reality, as an excuse to brutalize civilians, where do you draw the line? At what point is there going to be some sort of reasonable situation? Because if you really go down the line of, oh well, they're wearing a uniform so they could do whatever they want. I mean, resisting arrest, this young woman didn't understand the situation. She had just come through a serious operation. I mean, are these people fucking stupid? And okay, people are saying they didn't know that, but the mother was explaining it. But of course, they weren't listening. They said, oh, it's a hysterical woman, and then they're in militarized mode. This is the problem in America. Same with the police, because you cannot. There's no sort of communication. There's everything is about we're wearing a uniform. We are gods. That's their attitude, and I think it's disgusting. Um, call me biased, say that I'm reacting with emotions. I am. Okay. I admit I am. I'm responding emotionally. But just one thing that makes my blood boil is abuse of power. And it seems to me that is very apparent in this case. And I'll tell you something. If there is more coverage of this case, and it turns out when this lawsuit is settled that there is more than meets the eye, and the mother and her daughter were maybe doing something that was warranting this situation, then I'll apologize and say I misunderstood these people, and yeah, I will do that. But I've looked at different sources for this, and nothing condones the way they were behaving based on the reports that have come out so far. I really think if they were so innocent, I really think if their behaviour was warranted in this case, they would be saying a bit more than, oh, we can't comment because of litigation. That's a bureaucratic answer. Okay, they may not be able to talk about the exact details, but they would say something. They would be saying something like, we deal with situations where people are violent, or they'd be given a more broad answer that would be some way to justify their behaviour. It seems to me they know damn well what happened and they're just trying to cover their own ass. It's cowardly and you know, I don't know how anyone could justify this. And quite frankly, the reason this sort of thing continues is because unfortunately so many people are prepared to make excuses for it. Although it does look like in this case a lot of people are understandably angry about it. I don't advocate vigilante justice or anything like that, but it does seem that in America there is one law for civilians and another for those in uniform. And it seems 99% of the time, if someone is wearing a uniform, they can get away with anything. That's abhorrent. And I'm not saying America is the only country that has this problem, but it does seem to be a big problem in America. So it's a complete disgrace. And like I say, if this case reveals that there was something more that we didn't know about, and maybe the mother or the daughter were acting aggressive or something, then I'll be prepared to publicly say I was wrong. I apologize for saying this about the authority there, but their behavior so far just seems arrogant and callous. They haven't even expressed any sort of human compassion for the fact that this young woman had just been through a cancer operation. So I think the discrimination claim is has quite a lot of weight because they don't even seem to care.